Hello, everyone, and welcome to this SAG-AFTRA Foundation Conversation at Home. I'm Dave Karger from Turner Classic Movies. Very happy to be here today. Before I introduce our special guest, on behalf of my friends at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to let you know that they have a COVID-19 relief fund to support SAG-AFTRA performers who are in urgent need as this pandemic continues. Since March of 2020, the foundation has given nearly $6 million in aid to over 6,300 performers and families who are facing extreme hardship. If you are a SAG-AFTRA member and you need help, please ask. If you're able to support our community and this crucial effort, please give. All the information can be found in the description of this video. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest, a two-time SAG Award nominee, I should say, for his performances in the cast of The Aviator and the Grand Budapest Hotel, Jude Law. Hello, Jude. Great to see you.
Hey, good to be here. How are you?
Really good, really good. So we're going to go through a bunch of the films in your career. Don't worry, not all of them, because then we would be here for about a week and we would run out of space on Zoom. But a bunch of highlights. Before I get into the films, though, I'd be curious to ask you a little bit about your childhood. I know your parents were both educators, and I'd just be curious where the interest in performing came from and how and when you knew that you had a talent for it.
It's a question, funnily enough, I was trying to trace back with my parents just recently. Because as you just mentioned, both my parents were teachers. They're now both retired, but neither of them had families or parents themselves who were particularly keen singers, actors, performers in any way. And they related it back to a group of friends that they met when I was a baby. So that's in the sort of early 70s. When they both settled down in Southeast London, and they joined, I think for social reasons initially, really, a local amateur theatre company. And I think I'm right in saying that the amateur theatre scene in the UK is pretty strong. I mean, most communities certainly used to have an amateur theatre or an amateur theatre company or an amateur opera company. And, you know, as is well known, that the theatre community, the legacy of theatre is quite all permeating in the UK still. Certainly in schools, and then obviously, as I mentioned, out of schools in amateur or amdram communities. And I grew up, my parents both took to it with huge passion. And my father is an actor, my mum is a director. And I grew up with my sister, usually in the back of this drafty old theatre in Southeast London that was the home to this company. Really just watching, I guess, and listening and learning, because I got involved as a child really young, getting roped in to do little parts. And then I joined the youth company of this amateur dramatic society. And then to answer the other part of that question, I think like any kid, you know, if I'm honest, I was told I was good at it very young. And, you know, what child doesn't like to be told that they're good at something? It became that thing that I did. I mean, I was okay at sport. I was okay at school. I wasn't particularly outstanding, but this performing, acting was something I remember being told very young. Oh, you know, Jude will do this and Jude can do that. And I loved it. And I loved the democracy of it. I loved being in plays as a kid with adults. And there was always a sort of, shared belief in the you know, the person who had the right idea had the best idea, and that didn't matter who it was or what age they were. And you know, if it's interesting being in a play with adults when all the adults are terrified and you're kind of not, you know, you feel confident, and you know, it's a very interesting environment, and I found it very appealing, and I conveyed that into school, and then eventually from school into another theatre company. And that's really how I fell into it.
Obviously, we're focusing on your screen work here today, but a lot of that early screen work came because of some wonderful performances you gave on stage when Les Parents Terribles came to United
That's
States.
right.
And was renamed Indiscretions, and you had a
That's right. I mean, if I'm honest, where I grew up, the idea of being in films, I loved being. My parents took me to the cinema an awful lot, and I was obsessed with films, both foreign. When I say foreign, like foreign language, and art house, and old movies and blockbusters. I mean, I watched and devoured everything. But the idea of being in films seemed very far-fetched, far-reached for me. Growing up, in Southeast London, I just didn't see that it was I didn't even think of it as a possibility. Whereas acting in theatre seemed realistic. And obviously, once I fell into the theatre as a professional actor, people would start talking about films, and I would audition for them or be offered them, and that's sort of how I segued into film acting.
And the first film I want to ask you about, not your first film, but one of your earlier films from '97 is Wilde, because I feel like that's a movie that was something of a splash for you. And if you go back and look at that performance as Bosie Douglas, and I think you're like 24 years old, 23, 24 when you shot it, there's a confidence there. Obviously, a lot of that confidence is because of the character. That's how he carries himself. But I even sense that in you as an actor. Do you think it's because you had some substantial theater work under your belt that you were able to kind of have such confidence in your early screen work?
Yes, I think it was a part of it. I'd worked at the National Theatre. I'd worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'd done a lot of theatre in and around the smaller theatres, but really the sort of what we would say, I guess, off West End theatres. So yeah, I guess that is where I knew how to prepare. I think, if I'm honest, a lot of it was also youthful confidence, and swagger, which was slowly whittled away at, as I got older. Because I do look back sometimes and think, wow, how did I stroll onto that set and do that? And I mean, there were certain elements to that, the sexuality and the I think there was quite a bit of nudity even in that film. I was thinking about that recently, and I just had no problem with it. I think I was convinced that, commitment and enthusiasm and throwing oneself into something wholeheartedly and being there for the director was the best way forward, and it served me well for several years. I mean, I think what I realized I had to then come back or start to nurture was more of a process and more of a sort of a studious approach. But Wilde did. It's good you brought that up, because it really did come directly from a play. I was doing Indiscretions on Broadway, and I became friends for the time with Rufus Sewell, who was also doing. I think he was doing translations on Broadway, and he very kindly, I think he had auditioned for Bosie. And told them that they should meet me, because Bosie was described as this sort of, prettier than pretty blonde young thing. And he was like, oh, you should meet Jude Law, because back then I was almost looked like a little girl. And he very kindly sort of shoved them my way. So that's how that came about. But it was what I always consider sort of one of my first film in a way, certainly my breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah. This is so fun for me, because you and I are the exact same age. I'm 3 months younger than you. So every movie that I'm talking about, it's so fun for me, because when I was seeing it, you were the same age filming it. And I feel like I'm going through this with you.
Yeah. Have you gotten to that point then where you're sort of reflecting on all those different chapters, because suddenly they are 20 years ago or 25 years ago, and
absolutely, and
you're a little more forgiving.
Gattaca, I know, is important to you, and I remember very affected by that movie when I saw it in '97. Jerome Morrow, your character, wheelchair bound. My understanding also that this was kind of an introduction for you to kind of the Hollywood system, to LA. You were spending a lot of time there, so there was that to get used to, and then also just the logistics of acting naturally in the wheelchair, which was not something that the character had done his whole life. This was a result of a car accident. So how did that all play into it? The acting in the chair and making it natural.
Yeah, so Gattaca was indeed the first time I was offered a film role abroad, and in particular Hollywood. So it was a huge deal for me, and a real landmark. Moving to Los Angeles and rehearsing on a in a studio lot, and working with great actors that I'd seen on the big screen in the company of these extraordinary producers. I mean, Danny DeVito was one of our producers. It was sort of at times mind blowing what was going on, and yet going back to what I said before about my approach, I think there was also this part of me which is always about like get the part right and be confident in the part, and a lot of that. Whilst I had this experience as an actor on stage, I was sort of learning on the hoof, but with that particular role, it was key to me to get the physicality right. So I worked with a couple of guys in London, who one of whom was born paraplegic, and the other was in an accident, and both obviously were wheelchair bound, and they gave me incredible insight and physical demonstrations actually of the way they moved around their house. And I guess reflecting now, it was a real eye-opener to the potential of doing the right amount of work, thorough physical work and preparation, so that you could arrive on a set and be really confident in what was thrown at you. And also, this level of responsibility that if you're playing someone who has a physical disability or a particular lifestyle, you have to study it. You have to be clear and truthful to it. And then I worked again with another man in and on the set, because there's a scene in the film when I have to, my character throws himself out of his chair to ascend this beautiful spiral staircase. And he and I worked together on that before we filmed it for several days, I think. Yeah. Wow.
When I think back to this early part in your career, with movies like Wilde, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, where you played an escort, essentially, the early part of your career is marked by a real sense of daring. And I'm curious as to whether that was just kind of ingrained in you. Is that because of theater work? And so things like that didn't scare you? Did you have any pushback from people? Like maybe you shouldn't be taking all these sexually frank roles. What's your recollection of that time in general?
I don't remember getting much pushback, but I don't know, obviously, whether that was because I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I remember, those particular roles that you've mentioned, it would have been foolish not to do them. Wilde, Bosie in Wilde was a terrific supporting role with a wonderful direct, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which you mentioned again, was, directed by Clint Eastwood, and it had Kevin Spacey in it. And I mean, at the time it was very clearly a good decision. I think I was aware that I was being sent up for and perceived as this kind of good-looking, pretty boy. And I was really keen to play against that. I was really keen to set up my stall as a serious actor and as a character actor, or as an actor who was versatile and not a one-trick pony who was sort of relying on looks in any way. So that was, if anything, my sort of modus operandi, if I had one. But in truth, I was sort of following my nose a little. And as most actors will tell you, you've got to deal with what's in front of you. If nothing's in front of you, you got to look for something. And if there is something in front of you, you got to sort out, well, which of these suits me best, or which of these will get me the next job.
Yeah. Well, if there was a role that ever allowed you to achieve both sides, it's Dickie Greenleaf in The Talented.
True. Well, funnily enough, that was the one film I pushed back against. I mean, this is the most ridiculous story now, or decision making. So I had done several of these smaller films, and as I told you, I had this sort of fight in myself that I didn't want to be perceived as this good-looking guy, and I get offered this incredible role, and my first instinct is not to do it. I don't know what I was thinking. Anthony then had to come down to this set. I was making this tiny little weird little movie called Wisdom of Crocodiles or something that I don't think anyone ever saw, possibly, fortunately. And Ant came down to sort of persuade me. And of course, once I engaged with him, he was the most warm and spirited and lovely man.
Anthony Minghella, people you're talking about, the director.
Anthony Minghella, yeah. But also he obviously clearly set out his vision of the film and the other actors involved. And I realized that I was maybe fighting the wrong end. So I jumped on board. But
talked you into it.
Anthony did. He did successfully.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I mean, it sounds as if that was really an idyllic. I mean, you've told so many great stories over the years of just, being down in Ischia and being forced to get a tan and, having this wonderful life with the cast.
It was an extraordinary experience. Yeah. So the trappings that you mentioned were all added to this sense of a kind of golden memory. But in truth, the collaboration on the set and the focus of what Anthony wanted to make and how he communicated that and shared that with all of us, cast and crew alike, was really the overriding memory and experience that I took away. And of course, it being on the coast of Italy and in the summer and on boats and in the ocean and all of that made it this blissful experience. But I had the same experience with him in the sub-zero mountains of Romania and in the swamps of Virginia when I was working with him on Cold Mountain and beyond. And I suppose what I'm saying is really the overriding memory with the people and the work.
Yeah. The climactic scene in the boat with the oar.
Yeah.
I just remember how true, I had not read the book when I saw the movie. I just remember how truly shocking that was. And I've heard you tell stories about kind of laying in the heat in that boat with Matt Damon with the fake blood caked all over you. But just as far as shooting the emotion of it and the action of it and the intensity of it, what's your recollection of that?
So I remember we rehearsed the film in parts for a couple of weeks in Rome at Cinecittà, the studio there. And I remember the three of us, Matt, Anthony, and myself, in this boat. And in true Ant style, he got everything one needed for the rehearsal. So even though we're in a studio, we were rehearsing with a boat, and so we can get the proximity and the physicality. And it was very clear emotionally how far he wanted us to go, and the antagonism from Dickie to Tom, the idea that Tom in the end is sort of stamping out the vitriol, I suppose, that Dickie is throwing at him, almost like swatting a bug away. And this notion of also that in a way, because of, it was a very strong idea that the first blow he gives Dickie kind of cuts Dickie's golden face in half. So in a way, I think Ant wanted one to feel that if Tom hadn't killed Dickie, Dickie would have probably killed Tom. So the fight had to be, and if you notice, we go from one end to the other like this. It's like a kind of arm wrestle until, as I mentioned, Tom kind of stamps him to death, really. So we were pretty clear. Of course, a lot of that rehearsal goes out the window when you're in the middle of the ocean and the boat's rocking and the oar breaks, and then it's midday and it's 40 degrees or 100 something degrees, and which is all part of it. You play the situation, the truth of the situation. But a lot of the work that had gone in was sort of in the DNA of us and it already. And then it was a case of just, I think we did it over 2 days, maybe 3, just getting the beats right. I think the first part of it was shot actually on a jetty with just half a boat looking out to sea, because we had this huge prosthetic on my face that needed constant treating. And that was the first day. The second day we were out at sea where they could actually get a pontoon and see the boat and see us much more physically. And then the last day was in the boat with us.
Wow. Well, it was so powerful, and a very well-deserved Oscar nomination for you, the first of your 2 so far. Because I work at Turner Classic Movies, I'm so curious to ask you about the preparation that you did for AI, because my understanding is that to play Gigolo Joe, you really studied people like Fred Astaire and Gene in order to get that right. I want to hear more about that and what that was like for you to do.
It was extraordinary to me that after an initial conversation with Spielberg, he empowered me to go away and do all this work and just investigate to follow my kind of curiosity, really. And we had this idea that he could be, I remember off the initial conversation, Stephen had this idea that he wanted him to feel sort of gentlemanly and old-fashioned, even though he was a gigolo and a robot. And so we came up with the idea of the music and the old tunes, and that he maybe could have a jukebox inside him that he could change every time he tilted his head. A new record would come on, and then it became obvious that he would also therefore need a physicality, and the physicality had to hint at something robotic and mechanic, but at the same time be fluid. So yeah, I went off and worked. He let me then go off and really work on that any which way I thought necessary. So I worked with a choreographer for months. I wish it had been years, because of course, you can't become Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire overnight. That takes decades. But I worked hard and would send these little videos of different ideas, movement, little tap dance routines, little ways of standing or walking, and we would send them weekly off to Stephen, who was prepping in LA, and I was in London, and he would send back notes and we'd have conversations. So that's how that all evolved. And it was really handy. It kind of gave Joe a limitation that made me comfortable with his robot. The thing about creating Joe was I had to limit what he knew and what he didn't know. There was only so much that he was programmed to understand. And the evolution he goes on is to make this tiny little recognition of, oh, he is present. His last line is so profound. I am, I was, knowing that he's about to die, he's about to be finished, and therefore his existence is over. But I mean, whilst it's a tiny leap, it's a profound leap for a programmed entity to make. And the physicality gave me a lot of that confinement, if you like.
That's great. Road to Perdition is one that I find so fascinating, and my God, what a cast. I mean, as from people who were legendary, like Paul Newman, someone at the top of their game, like Tom Hanks, a future superstar like Daniel Craig, and it's just kind of, and Sam Mendes, it's all kind of mind blowing. Maguire, who you play, very kind of, unsavory character with the rotting teeth and all that. I want to ask you specifically about the scene in the diner with you and Tom Hanks, where you're having the conversation with each other from different booths, and he's basically outsmarting you in the moment. That must have been very exciting to shoot, because the dialogue is great, but then also what you're doing with your face is really interesting. What are your recollections of that?
So, all the elements you just mentioned made that experience, the whole experience, really wonderful, both as an actor and as a human being. They were all very, very great craftsmen from whom I learned so much, but also really lovely people from whom I learned so much. So it was a very special time, that, and living in Chicago, I didn't know Chicago well, and I was fortunate enough to spend the months there, and I loved it. I fell in love with that city. That scene was a night shoot. We were shooting in a beautiful old diner, roadside diner that, thinking back, they must have built it. Can't believe it was an original, or maybe it was an original that they'd sort of spruced up, but there it was on the side of this dirt track in the middle of nowhere outside of Chicago, so that we could do all the drive ups. And it had to be clearly in a rural setting because of the dark fields around us. And, it was lit and filled as if for real. And so we just go in and we block it out and we get on with it. We get our heads down and we shoot it. As with so many of my memories and experiences of working with these really great actors and great directors, you prep, you discuss, you rehearse, and then you just shoot. You see what happens, but all the conversation, all the talking is over and done with, and you just pick it apart when the camera's turning over. I have a memory of being blown away at Tom. First of all, Tom being able to eat steak after steak after steak, because he's eating a steak nervously during that scene and doesn't stop eating. And he ate about 6 steaks. But not only that, he's the only person I've ever worked with who seems to be able to, he can sweat on cue. Like there's one moment where this perspiration just goes whoop down his face, and he would do it, maybe not exactly on the same line, but every single time on his close-up, this bead of sweat somewhere would run. It was like, how's he doing that? So going back a little bit, that was around the time I realized I wanted to sort of evolve a bit more of a process to my preparation. I've talked a bit about, learning like, skill sets, whether or adding, understanding to a part physically, whether it's the dance or talking to people who are perhaps paraplegic or whatever it may be, that one should study. And with Maguire, there was such a sort of physical embodiment that I went much more into this sort of animal and kind of almost a sort of physical, mental, other place to sort of find him, because he was so sort of distant from me, and yet there also wasn't anything I could necessarily hang a hat on saying, oh, that's who he is. So it was sort of trying to create this other person, this being, and there wasn't a lot in the script to go off. It was quite fleeting, the mentions of him, and there was a graphic novel that they based the script on, or they adapted. And again, Maguire, I think, was either a composite of characters or just mentioned at the end. So I had free reign, but that's not always the easiest way to start. But I do remember, creating this man and sort of living in him, and trying to stay in character, because that was the best way to hold on to him through a long night shoot like that one, or in all these scenes when he was on his own, because he's always one step behind the rest of the team, the crew who are kind of moving on. He's chasing them.
You also have quite an unforgettable death moment in that. Just the way he falls, he falls to his knees and then blop right on the face. Was that all planned out? I'm assuming that's you and not a stunt person.
That was me. Yeah. I remember I was really proud of learning to do that. It's basically a face fall, but you take it on your hands. You kind of hide your hand somewhere else, but it looks like you're just going bang on the floor. And I worked with that with the stunt guy. No, again, that was something we came up with. I think we were all so bowled over by the way the great Conrad Hall had lit this room. And if anyone ever wants to go back and look at that scene, nowadays you would look at that scene and there's a reflection through the glass of the shore, and all you keep hearing is this beautiful sound of water lapping on a beach. And it looks like it's been projected, but Connie lit it in such a way that actually that is the sea outside coming in, sort of like a refraction through the glass. And I think we all walked in and were sort of under the spell of this incredible, intoxicating light and sound. And then, as I've mentioned before, it was really just the practicality. Okay, how do we film this? How do we best create this shocking ending, both for Tom and for me? Yeah.
You did it. All together. I want to ask about Cold Mountain, which you've alluded to already. Like, go ahead, make another movie with Anthony Minghella and get another Oscar nomination for yourself. That's a good way to do it. There's so much to talk about with Cold Mountain. If you don't mind, I'm curious about the dialect, because I'm always amazed at how well most British actors, great British actors, can do American dialects. In this one, I mean, you had done them before, but this was a Southern dialect, which you do so well. Did you find that easier or harder than other American dialects that you had done?
Quite honestly, I've found others harder, but they're always hard, and they should be, because, you know, you don't want to insult anyone. You want to get things right. And I tend, certainly when I'm trying to find an American accent, I tend to work with Tim Monach, who is just the greatest and the loveliest man to have around, but also a fountain of wisdom linguistically and just in general. He always brings so much more than just, you know, say it like this, or, you know, you're dropping your H's or whatever it may be. He brings a warmth and insight to just language itself. And he would phonetically give you wonderful little lessons, you know, for you to go away and it really educate the muscles in your mouth and jaw and throat to make these sounds that perhaps you're not used to making, and so that you just feel fluid with it. And you can, not that you're always looking to be able to improvise around it, but you don't want to be limited to, oh, yeah, don't change the line, I can only say it like that, you know. And a lot of that, again, you do that beforehand and prep really, really hard, and whilst you're making the film. And having then Tim there, as I always call it, my catch net, you know, he's listening to every word and every and every sound, and it gives you more confidence having the person there, and just having done the work, doing the prep, you know.
It's interesting, as I've spent the last couple of days, you know, researching you and learning about all the things that you've done. Like, I have this mental list in my head of like the 10,000 reasons why I could never do what you do. One of them is all the kind of close animal contact that you clearly had to have.
Oh, really?
Get it. I mean, I don't know if you were cutting chickens' heads off. I'm not sure what you had to do, but it was just all a little bit too close for comfort for.
It was all very real too. I remember early on getting to Romania. We shot a lot of the larger scale scenes in Romania, because this was 18 years ago. And it largely was undeveloped. And so you could film for miles and miles without the tattoo of modern man. You know, there were no pylons, there were no roads, and it had a sort of symmetry also to the areas of the States that we were looking to replicate. But Anthony referenced The Tree of Wooden Clogs, this incredible Italian film from the, I think, early 70s, late 60s. And it was made actually within an Italian rural community. But, you know that the bulls that they're milking and the chickens that they're killing and the mice that they're stamping are real. And he said early on when we were rehearsing that, I want this to be as real as possible. So the fish I'm catching is a real fish, and the cow, I got to, all of the nasty stuff. But it gave us much more, it gave us much more authenticity. But another insight was that we were staying in this little village just outside of, funnily enough, just outside of, down from Dracula's castle, the real castle, right? You can see the castle up on the hill. And there are all these beautiful woods around it. And then we're in the village at the foot of the hill. Well, the villages, certainly back then, had no fencing. So the cattle would just wander around the streets. You'd wake up with a cow in your front garden, And then when you got milk, it was always just in a bucket, unpasteurized. And you'd have bears in your garden sometimes. And I mean, you felt this proximity with animals anyway, just being in rural Romania at that time. And it all kind of helped. I'm sure Anthony planned it all. Maybe Anthony sent those bears and cows into my garden. I don't know.
That's great. I want to quickly about Alfie and Sleuth, because in both of these films, you're taking on kind of roles famously portrayed by Michael Caine, and then in the second one, you're doing it with Michael Caine, who's Laurence Olivier role.
My Michael Caine chapter.
What was that like? I mean, I should be so curious to know if he had anything to say to you about Alfie after he saw it and you guys were working together. Did you guys not really go there? What kind of conversations were you having?
I don't remember him ever specifically commenting on it. I think he recounted, as he is so brilliant at doing, many of his memories of him making that his version and the original and many of his other great films in the past. He's a fantastic raconteur, and he tells stories with such humor and love. He loves acting and loves making films, and so has really fond memories. I don't remember him particularly sort of ever sort of saying, what he thought of it particularly. I think we became very close, and so I can only imagine he was all right with it. It was a pure accident. It wasn't like some obsession of mine or any great, desire. And it's not like I feel like we're even particularly similar in style or certainly not in background, but they were both interesting roles at that time and challenges that I sort of thought were worth taking.
Well, I look forward to your remake of Blame It on Rio about 15 years from now.
Yeah.
I have to talk about Closer because that was a National Board of Review award winner for Best Ensemble for you and Clive Owen, Julie Roberts, and Natalie Portman. And reason 10,004 that I couldn't do what you do is to learn that the role that you played in Closer was the role that Clive had played in the stage version. And I would just be paralyzed here thinking, what does he think about how I'm doing with the role that's his? How did you get past that?
To be honest, stepping into my concerns stepping into that project were along those lines, but tenfold, because I'd seen the play in London with Clive playing my part. I'd seen the play in New York. I knew the play very well. I knew the writer. I knew Patrick well. It felt like there were fingerprints all over this thing. But at the same time, it's Mike Nichols, it's Natalie Portman, it's Clive, obviously it's Julia. It's this incredible team. Of course, you want to get involved. And Mike had this incredible ability to make he would just, through love, he would give you such confidence. And our rehearsal process was really just sitting around this table in New York, talking through every scene and about each other and about each other's characters and about what happens in between, because the film starts and is really only meetings and breakups on the whole. And by the end of that process, you felt so confident, safe, in his hands, that it really didn't ever come up again. I think that also goes for the fact that Clive's a really good guy, and he wasn't like he was sat there watching me or saying, "You're not going to do it like that, are you?" He was generous and from the get-go, very generous.
Again, being from TCM, I got to ask you about The Aviator, playing Errol Flynn. And I went back and watched that just fantastic scene with you and Leonardo DiCaprio Kate Blanchett as Katharine Hepburn, Adam Scott as the press agent in that club. That must have
been Coconut Grove.
Right. That must have been so fun to do.
It was such fun. And one of the first times I'd ever sort of flown in to just work for a couple of days, on something of that scale. Obviously you do that when Mr. Scorsese asks you to, and to join in what feels already like a party, because I think Leonardo had been there for months maybe already, and this film was huge. I remember that it was Kate's first day. So Kate was sort of more anxious, obviously, than I was, because I was just there to kind of have a ball. And I think I was in and out in like 4 days. And Kate was just beginning what became an Oscar-winning, or certainly Oscar-nominated, Oscar-winning, right? Performance. But again, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but there's a theme here, isn't there? That my memory was that Marty had just created, both in scale, visuals, but also in mood, the Grove, the Coconut Grove. So by the time you arrive and sit down to film that, people having dinner, there's dance girls, there's a band playing, the atmosphere is so conducive and authentic. And prior to that, gosh, I'm going to have to remember the name of the film. Prior to that, in Marty fashion, he screened this beautiful movie for us all the night before, or a couple of nights before, to get a sense of the rhythm of the speech of that period. And so you felt, again, confident. Again, I'm using the same words, confident and safe in the hands of this great director. And if you've done your homework, you can just go in and enjoy it and let it come alive, And I loved the opportunity to investigate Errol Flynn a little. I remember going to the library, the audio library in Los Angeles, to listen to interviews of him on the radio and on TV. So I could, again, work with Tim, who I worked with Marty and Leo, I think, on most of their projects. So we're working with Tim Monach again and trying to get that particular Tasmanian English American accent of Flynn's right was, a treat.
Well, clearly you made an impression on Scorsese, because he had you back years later for Hugo. So good on you there. Okay, The Holiday. There's no way we're doing this and not talking about The Holiday. And because it's so fascinating, because that's such a different movie for you. Like, you're making this, solidly Nancy Meyers.
Yeah.
And I love her movie, straight ahead romantic comedy. I imagine it helped that you had Kate Winslet there. You guys already knew each other from before, although not much stuff is there with her. And then my understanding is that Nancy wanted you to study some Clark Gable in preparation. Is that true?
I think, it was more Clark Gable and not in specificity, but more in that era and that era's romantic comedies. Jimmy Stewart's, Cary Grant. I think she wanted to try and capture a sense of the origins of the romantic rom-com genre, and in ambience and in tone. And so, yes, she sent me off to rewatch all those great romantic comedies that just had a sort of lightness of touch and humanity and a sense of being unabashed about their romance. And again, I think I up to that point had only just realized I had to stop sort of fighting against this romantic lead, because I always saw it as a trap in a way. And then I got to a point where I thought, actually, first of all, that's a challenge. I want to take on that challenge. Can I pull it off? Can we pull it off? But also it just felt suddenly like something I wanted to lean into rather than run away from. And it was a real sharp learning curve, like learning to really punctuate humor and what it takes to punctuate humor on film, with people like Jack and Cameron and Kate, and then obviously Nancy around it was a real learning curve, is what I'm saying. Yeah. It was tricky to learn, but such lovely people, super people to work with.
And it sounds like people love to come up to you and talk about that movie.
Well, who knew? Yeah. I mean, it's a really, especially this time of year, it's a really popular film. And it's become, how wonderful it's become for some people, part of their annual festivities.
It's great. Speaking of popular films, we got to talk about Sherlock Holmes. And I can only imagine when you first heard about this and, started talking to Guy Ritchie and Robert Downey Jr., who I know you really hit it off with, was it kind of instantly like, oh, if this goes well, we're going to do a few, or let's just try one and maybe that'll be it? Like, what was the thought process in all of your heads going into it?
Well, a bit of both. I think there's in the background the mechanical whirrings of this could run and run. This could keep working, right, if we get this right. But it's clear also that you have to get the job at hand right, and you have to make it a success, and you have to create something that people want more of. That's always the case. So it was also a daily exercise in how to extricate and use the people on board to their best. And by the second, what was exciting was that we'd sort of honed down this process that involved all of us really contributing to the evolution of each scene. So there would be the framework in the script. I would arrive most days with this sort of tome of quotes and lines that I'd taken out of the Conan Doyle books. We'd improvise. Downey is boundless in his ideas, imagination, bravery, hilarity. So we would come up with these zany ideas. Guy, who is a writer himself, would sort of whittle it down and structure it and give us guidelines and always tell us something was too much. Take the dress off. That's too much. Or, you know what I mean? You can't come in on your hands. What do you do? Whatever. And then we'd nail the scene. We'd go away. They'd light it, set up the camera, and we'd go back in and shoot really, really quickly. So it became this sort of organic process. And that felt like the most expressive, the most natural of that team. And by doing so, I think people pick up on an energy and an inclusion that comes from that process. And that's, I think, why we tapped into an energy that was kind of unique. And if you think back, the sort of banter that we were trying to play with, sort of, I mean, we were looking at films like Butch and Sundance, right? But in truth, that's become now much more of the sort of language of action-y movies. It's that sort of trying to find that rapport.
Sure. Yeah. Contagion, I just want to touch on quickly, and this is something you've spoken about several times, especially recently, because people are bringing it up. But my understanding is that even in 2010, 2011, when you were making this movie, the conversations were, it's a when or not if this is going to happen in the real world. Did you, when people were telling you that, the experts, did that sink in at the time? Like, wow, this is probably going to happen in my lifetime? Or were you kind of just focusing on the movie at that point?
Well, you're focusing on the film, obviously, and you're also listening to the advice of these brilliant people around you who are adding authenticity to the project, whose subject matter is so alarming. But as I think I've said before, I think the effect of what was being said and the shock and the sense, the daunting sense that this was a reality certainly sits in the surface of your mind and body for a period of time. But you don't necessarily, if nothing happens, if nothing changes, then it's not like you live with that threat always. And that was 10 years ago. So I remember being very aware of everything we're being told to do now. distancing, how and where to sneeze, hand washing, all of that stuff. But, after I can't remember, maybe a year, 18 months, life's normal, you carry on. It was really when it hit the beginning of this year that the alarm bells went off, and all the advice and the different ways in which people have had opinion or been instructed to guide themselves through this, it all kind of came back to me. And I guess I was both I was in a way not surprised because of what I'd been told, but also shocked at myself that I, if you like, been given this view into the crystal ball, and I'd taken it seriously, but I'd not necessarily thought I better remember that daily,
Wow. Grand Budapest Hotel is my favorite Wes Anderson movie, and I love all of his movies. What strikes me when I go back and watch some of your stuff in that is the intricacy of what you have to do performing and then with the voiceover, because you're narrating and there's moments where a character will say something and then we hear your voiceover, he said.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you had to do all that voiceover, and particularly like these 2-word little inserts, almost in like a vacuum, or did he have you reading it more like a book and then he would take out the little snippets that he would need to make it seem so seamless? If that question makes any sense at all.
No, it makes absolute sense. And it's easy to answer because Wes is so particular in his visions and from my experience, obviously I've only made the one film with him, but in how he went about constructing that beautiful film. And he had already storyboarded it and drawn up almost everything, I believe everything, prior to us making it. So it was a case of just piecing together, obviously visually, what he had already envisioned. And then rhythmically, he had recorded so that you could look at this thing and hear the sort of like a piece of orchestrated music, the dialogue. So when I got to, I don't remember the name of the town. We were right on the border of Germany and Poland. Literally, I would go for a run and I could run into Poland and back out again on my run in the morning until the snow came. And then it was sort of 5 feet of snow that no one was running anywhere. We lived in a hotel that I think serves as part of the hotel in the film. And he had taken over this disused old department store, which became the lobby of the hotel and certain areas of the hotel. And within that, he had all vast space. So we had this little recording studio that he had built. And I went in, again, it was, a part that only took 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. And I went in to this little booth and, as you rightly noticed, read it really like a book. But if you think about it tonally and stylistically, his films are sort of like that, or that one, certainly. It's almost like, the position of a head is as if it's been illustrated. It's not sort of there. It's there. There are always sharp angles, and the use of people speaking or being introduced or a sentence being finished by a narrator as opposed to the person in the scene is all, again, as if you're turning the pages and reading something either in the voice of someone else or by the narrator of the book. So he had all that down, and it was a case really, I suppose, of the production of him just accumulating what he needed. But I felt very much in his world and and I was happy to just give him what he wanted. Like you, I was a huge fan and I just wanted to be in that world for a bit. And it was very, very warm and very comfy being in it.
A similar challenge, I think, was presented for you in the movie Spy. And after I ask you about this, I have to ask you about Melissa McCarthy and just working with her because she's the greatest. But when I was watching some scenes back on that one, in the early parts of the film where her character is in your character's ear, and you're doing all this action stuff. But of course, all that audio was not in the moment. She's not in your ear as you're filming the movie. That's all added later. So what was it like to get the precision right of you knowing exactly when to react as if she was saying something to you, when you're responding to her, and when you're doing all the physical stuff too? That must have been like a mathematical equation in some ways.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to remember. First of all, it was definitely much harder for me because I did all my stuff first. And so when she did her bits, she was able to watch and see what I was doing. No, I think that's right. Yeah, that is right. Not that she needed it to be easier, because she's a master at what she does.
Someone shouting out what she would eventually be heard saying in your ear?
Yeah, she recorded it and they would play it back to me, and then we'd do different versions. But as on most of Paul Feig's films, there are always alternatives, right? So he's got both his own genius mind and those writers around him who are coming up with, oh, say this, or wouldn't it be funny if she said that and he said this? So you're always doing alts, and you realize from day one, okay, I better stay on my toes here. You know, this can go any which way. As indeed, not just when they're in your ear, but also obviously when you're in a scene in front of them.
It's so fun to watch the blooper reel of you just break.
I've never watched it. I've got to watch that back. I bet that is fun.
Just search your name, Spy bloopers, and there's a whole bunch of you guys in the restaurant.
Other
at the table where you just cannot keep it together.
What is extraordinary is how you can take a single moment or a single gag and just keep coming at it with different ideas, and the speed at which Melissa could deliver stuff or think of things was just awe-inspiring. And what I learned very quickly was, I was very happy to play the straight guy, because I was like, okay, that is not what I do. You do what you do brilliantly. I'm going to hold my own by being the straight guy. I'll be the fool guy, you know.
Well, it worked brilliantly. Okay, so now we're getting to the last couple of years, just a few projects left to talk about. The Young Pope, I'm fascinated by, because by and large, you hadn't done much, if any, television work. And obviously this Paolo Sorrentino, who, I mean, was like a movie anyway, so it's not like, you know, typical TV. But I love the fact that you, now make sure I'm getting this right, you really were a fan of the great beauty and Il Divo and his work. Had you written him a letter, or had you just thought to yourself, I'd love to work with him, and then he reached out to you?
No, it was a real, it was a moment of just great fortune. I had seen all his films, and he was someone, you know, I like to try and always keep an idea and take notes of who and what I've seen and who I'd love to work with in the future, or a dream list, or whatever it may be. And as I said at the beginning of our conversation, I'm a fan of film. I'm a fan of filmmakers, and I love watching and learning of new people. And he was someone at that particular time I was just in awe of, and it was just this wonderful moment. Like I suddenly get this letter that he's in town and wants to meet me, and he has this idea, and he pitches me this idea and gives me this 2 sheets of description of the sort of life of this extraordinary character, Lenny Bellardo, who becomes Pope and loses his faith as he becomes Pope, and all the odd personal little quirks of this man, his smoking and his drinking of Cherry Coke Zero. And
can't find any more in the pandemic, and I'm devastated about it.
Oh no, really?
So much, my Cherry Coke Zero, but go on.
We drank it all. I think that's what happened. We had stacks of that stuff. And it was an extraordinary opportunity. It was, you're right. I hadn't done television since I was a really young actor, young lad, really starting out. And it was right at that time, really, where it felt that television was becoming a sort of finding a new sense of respect, and people were curious about the opportunity of expanding these stories and these ideas over 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours. So to receive this tome of a script from Paolo, which was ultimately like a 10-hour film that we shot out of sequence and really like a movie over 13 months, 14 months, and learning a new rhythm to storytelling, because what I realized was I was hardwired to address a character in a sort of 3-act structure over 90 minutes or 110 minutes. And suddenly you're dealing with this slower reveal, this slower sort of peeling of a character, and slowing that down and slowing down the sense of the arc was, well, it was new for him too, because he had never done such a long piece either. But similar to Wes, he has a whole world in his imagination, a whole clear, thought through, visual, oral and tonal kind of layered idea that you step into and you're free to sort of play in. But I remember an insight that might explain this. There's a scene when I'm talking about an empty plate, because the press officer of the Vatican is trying to persuade Lenny to put his face on a plate, that they make great money from this. And he sends for a plate and has this plain plate and has this extraordinary speech about all these great artists that never reveal themselves, and that his anonymity, because only God has a voice. He is not important. And it was a long speech. I have several long speeches in that show, and I had this whole idea of him parading around this room and throwing the plate, and he just wanted me to stand still and hold this plate and talk. But it was like 3 pages long. I remember thinking, I'm really uncomfortable doing this. I just feel so static. But then he shot it on all these incredible moving lenses. And when you see it, it's like it's pulling in and shifting focus and moving around me. And he did all the work. Wow. He did all the work. And all he needed was for me to know my lines and deliver the passion. And I just handed it over. But it was clear he had seen it in his head and was like, this is how we do it. Trust me. And that's why he is the maestro,
So he didn't necessarily explain to you on the shoot day that the finished product would look like it would because of what he was going to do?
No, not particularly. I don't remember him describing the finished product. I remember him describing a little of how he was going to cover it, and me realizing, wow, okay, you're really covering this. If I'm honest, I still felt a little rooted and static, but what I'm saying is I learned very quickly from watching back what he was filming that he was adding the movement.
Yep. Amazing. A Fantastic Beast has been such a gift for you in the last couple of years with your career. I imagine for several reasons that must be a rewarding part to play. You have children of different ages, so I'm sure various of your kids probably read Harry Potter. Maybe you read it to them. There's the Michael Gambon of it all. There's the Joe Rowling of it all. I know you've gotten to know her a little bit, and she's explained the character in quite a lot of detail to you. What from your point of view has been the best part of playing Dumbledore and being a part of this franchise?
Well, this is easy to talk about because I'm still in the middle of finishing the third film, the second film which I appear in. And I said this to my wife just last night. I just love this man. It's really, you have to learn to understand the characters you play, and you learn, I think, to find yourself in them and them in you. And it's always refreshing to learn to not judge and to fully appreciate a different perspective on a world. But when you get to play someone that you are genuinely inspired by, and so stepping into their shoes and their skin in their senses every day is a sort of uplifting experience, because they are ultimately greater than you. is a wonderful experience. But there's also I don't want to give too much away, but there's a pain to him that I find so moving and touching, a sacrifice that we're investigating a little more in this new film that makes him so touching. And it's nice to play a good man. He's a really good man. And, I've reveled in the past playing, I hope, bringing a bit of humanity to people who are maybe not good or certainly not straightforward. And I like that. I like finding humanity in flawed people. But it's really enjoyable playing a good person and someone who also doesn't necessarily see just how good they are. And in addition, of course, it's pretty fantastic playing someone who is magic, someone who has incredible wizarding skills, because I can do all sorts, and it's basically what my imagination, can dream up. I'm like, oh, can I do this? And they're like, of course you can. You're Dumbledore. Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. That's an application to a part that no other has ever given me.
When it comes to The Third Day, which is a show that people have discovered in the last, obviously, couple of months since it's been released, is that something that felt in the doing of it as experimental as it sometimes appears in the
absolutely
watching of it?
Oh yeah, and that was the attraction to me.
Right.
It's so interesting talking about one's career, because you suddenly maybe start to see the patterns that you maybe wouldn't have seen otherwise. So I feel like I'm repeating myself, and I apologize if that's the case. But, it starts always for me with the relationships with the people. I'd worked with Dennis Kelly, the writer. He's a brilliant writer, and we'd worked together before. Felix Barrett, who was one part of the production team and also the great mind, artistic director behind Punch Drunk Theatre, was a very important element. Mark Munden, the director, and Philippa Lothorpe, the director, were both people I knew of and wanted to work with. But there was this unknown quantity to the whole experience ahead of us, which was, can we do something live? Can we do something that draws people in? Can we approach serialized drama without fully explaining everything and through the eyes of a flawed narrator? So all those things were very apparent, and they were all reasons to get on board. I love the fear you get when you're stepping into something because it's unknown.
Yeah. We have to talk about The Nest, which a lot of people are talking about now. You and Carrie Coon both got Gotham Award nominations for that, very deservedly. I love Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, so I was very curious to see what else Sean Durkin, had up his sleeve. Yeah. And what intrigues me the most about this movie and your performances in it, you and Carrie, in film, you almost never have the luxury of shooting chronologically. And this is a movie that is such a slow burn, if you will, with the temperature between these two people in this couple, that I imagine that must have been one of the biggest challenges, was in each shooting day to figure out exactly where you both needed to be, shooting out of order, but to make sure that when it was edited together, it all flowed and was calibrated right.
Yeah. First of all, I think wherever we possibly could, Sean tried to schedule it so that it was chronological.
Oh, really?
So that there was, I'm talking about, those little decisions that one can influence. On the whole, though, you're right. For example, he just reminded me the other day that we spent, I think, a day, maybe two, in the bedroom of the couple, just shooting all the bedroom stuff. And he remembered it because he said that alone was like its own mini drama of a couple, just sort of going through all these extreme emotions, from sort of comfort and love to passion, to breaking up, to arguing. And I also feel like I'm repeating myself again. I apologize. But, Sean had written a very strong script for us to use as a map. And it was clear and precise. What I always loved about it was that it was about surviving a family, not about a family falling apart, and that at its heart, he really wanted it to be about the love story really of this couple, even though they're going through or becoming aware of each other's failings. And when you have someone across from you as instinctive and as naturalistic and as brave as Carrie Coon is, you really do have the confidence to turn up every day and just play each and every moment for real. We both knew the thing inside out, and we both had Sean there who was very clear about tonally how to keep it real and gentle. But we approached, I remember, every moment and every decision calmly. And from here, you know, it was about really playing these people honestly. And the calibration was really in the hands of Sean. And I was so... This is like saying I didn't think it was going to be good when I made it. I knew it was a good piece of work, and I knew that when I read it, and I knew working with Carrie and the work that we'd done in the production was good and sound. But I think Sean as a filmmaker, as all great, look, in the end, film is a director's medium, and every film really is about the film director. But what I'm trying to say is Sean is a really great filmmaker, and his calibration and what he saw us doing, and then how he took that into the editing room and finessed our journeys and simplified things, and, you know, sadly lost bits, but that's what happens in the hands of a great filmmaker. They reduce to the essence. And so what you picked up on, I think, really is his instincts and subtleties and sophistication, actually, as a filmmaker. And I think he's going to go on to make many, many more brilliant films. He's a real auteur. And I was thrilled to work with him in just his sort of second, third film.
Were you as obsessed with The Leftovers and Carrie Coon as
Exactly.
I was? Had you seen it beforehand?
I had. And I'd seen her on stage too. And so, of course, as soon as he just said, "Oh, Carrie Coon is playing Alison," I was so in and excited.
Yeah, it also is a movie that really delves into the idea of sometimes you don't know the person that you are actually closest to.
Yeah.
And it's that's part of
so many layers, both that and also, even though I don't know everything about this person, I still kind of know them. Like, that's the weird amp, you know what I mean? Because really, for all Rory's layers and lies and half truths, she does know him. And so in a way, it's also about what you choose to not know about someone, or what you choose to, you know, the complicity of a couple. That in a way, as he says to her, you know, you came along for this ride. You loved the money. You loved all the bullshit. So you can't now say, "Oh, that was you." It's like, because you loved it too, right? Mm-hmm. So in a way, they're both, it's more about revealing the truth and then saying, "Do we still love each other?" You know?
Yeah. Wow. It's fascinating. It's just great to watch you two together. Okay. Let me end with a 4-question kind of lightning round. You don't have to go into much detail here. I'm just curious to hear if you have answers to these questions. Okay. So we've talked about 18 or so of the films that you've done. Is there one, a lesser known one that maybe that we haven't brought up that you particularly love?
I have to recount what we just discussed and what, I can't remember everything I've made.
You've done a lot.
What's coming to my mind? I'm trying to think of things recently. Two pop out, but not. I mean, it wasn't particularly well received, but I was really fond of what Joe Wright did with Anna Karenina, and the bravery of really reducing it to almost a piece of theatre, an opera on film. I think elevated a very well-known story book that's been adapted many times before into a really beautiful piece of art. And certainly the way he and Tom Stoppard addressed the character I played, her husband, who's often used or seen rather as the fuddy-duddy sort of stiff husband, unloving, who sort of forces her out of the home. Instead, they gave him much more humanity and warmth. Mm. And I think that's truer to the book than other adaptations.
Okay. Question 2, is there one that you're in that if you're flipping the channels on the TV and it pops up that you'll actually sit and watch?
Probably not. No. it happened recently, and my wife had the controls, and I had to sort of wrestle them off her and say, "Please, no, please."
What was it? Do you remember?
I think it was AI. Actually, I just have this funny thing. I have to move on, and my voice always grates with me. I know that's not true. I've enjoyed watching some of the Sherlock Holmeses. They make me laugh. I love watching Downey. And they remind me of a lot of fun that we had together.
My third question was, is there one that you would never watch? Well, it sounds like that's the answer.
Most of them, yeah.
Okay. And then just in general, are there 1 or 2 or 3, including ones that we've probably talked about, that you, when you think back to all of these last 25 years, that you're particularly proud of?
Well, yeah, and that's a terrific question to answer, actually, because it means I can shed a bit of light on some that I didn't particularly think the end result was terrific, but the work that went into it was worthwhile. I mean, I certainly will always, look back on Gattaca, because it was the first time I went to Hollywood. Talented Mr. Ripley, because it was the first time I worked with Anthony and on a film of that sort of scale, and it changed my life because of the nomination that I received because of it. I mean, gosh, so many. To me, they're all quite pivotal, really. I was going to mention Dom Hemingway, which is this bizarre little film I made about this appalling man, but playing someone so unleashed and vile and vulgar and out of control was kind of mind-bending for me, and it unleashed in me. Well, interestingly, I played him just before I played Lenny, and I found in Lenny a kind of wonderful peace and stillness that I don't know I'd necessarily discovered had I not gone so crazy playing Dom.
Out of your system. That was very clever, whether you knew it or not. Well, all I can say to you is it's been a fascinating 25 years to see what you've done. And I can't wait to see what you do in the next 25, really, because I think there's a whole other bunch of chapters ahead that are going to be really fascinating, if The Nest is any indication of that. So I'm here for it. And
it's been really interesting talking about it. It feels, like I said to you before, sometimes discussing them, it's not something, well, I certainly don't sit around thinking about, and listening to them, listing them and discussing them in order has highlighted certain things that I've never really strung together. But I'll also say this, the fact that we're the same age, we'll have to do this in 25 years time and do it again, right?
I'll put it in my calendar for 2046.
Wow. And that sounds like a long way away. Yeah.
That'll be great. What a pleasure to spend some time with you, Jude. I really appreciate it on behalf of everybody at SAG-AFTRA Foundation. Just really nice of you to share your time and share your experience. So really, really appreciate it. And thanks to you all for watching this. This has been so much fun to do. I wish everybody a great day. Thanks so much again, Jude.
Best wishes.
Yeah.